The emergency transmission crackled through the vast emptiness of space, its signal weak and distorted after traveling through 3 star systems. Ambassador Kethara of the Velthani Republic pressed her 6-fingered hand against the smooth surface of her communication console, her large, dark eyes reflecting the blue glow of the holographic display. Her usually pristine silver robes were torn and stained with the purple blood of her people. This is Ambassador Kethara of Velthan Prime, she whispered, her voice breaking as another explosion shook the underground bunker where she hid. If anyone receives this message, if any civilized species in the galaxy still cares about justice, we need help. The Zorthak Empire has broken every treaty, every law of war. They're not just conquering us, they're exterminating us. She paused, listening to the sound of plasma fire echoing through the tunnels above. Her hands shook as she continued recording. 3 billion Velthani lived on our homeworld yesterday. Today maybe 300,000 remain, scattered and hiding. They've destroyed our cities, our farms, our hospitals. They've turned our children into... She couldn't finish the sentence. The horror was too fresh, too raw. Please, she begged, tears streaming down her pale blue cheeks. Someone help us. We'll give you anything, our technology, our remaining ships, our eternal gratitude. Just please, don't let them finish what they've started. The transmission ended abruptly as another blast rocked her hiding place, sending dust cascading from the ceiling. Kethara looked up fearfully, knowing that if the Zorthak found her, she would suffer the same fate as the millions who had already died. Her message would travel for days through space, bouncing off relay stations and communication buoys, growing weaker with each transmission. Most civilized species would receive it, express their sympathy, and file it away with the dozens of other pleas for help that came from the Outer Rim territories. After all, the Zorthak Empire was powerful, and getting involved in their conflicts was dangerous. Most species would ignore it. But there was one species that the galaxy's civilized races preferred to forget about, one group that lived far from the core worlds in a section of space marked on star charts as hazardous, avoid contact. They called themselves humans, and they lived on a world so dangerous that most aliens considered it barely habitable. The humans called it Earth. Captain Sarachen was having a bad day, which on a human military vessel meant that several things had gone wrong simultaneously and someone was probably about to die. She stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, a massive dreadnought that had seen action in a dozen conflicts across human space. Her short black hair was pulled back in a regulation military cut, and her dark eyes showed the kind of weariness that came from years of making life and death decisions. Captain, called Lieutenant Rodriguez from the communications station. We're picking up a distress signal. It's different from anything we've seen before. Chen walked over to the comm station, her boots clicking against the metal deck plating. The Retribution wasn't a pretty ship. Human vessels were built for function over form, with heavy armor plating and enough weapons to level a small moon. Comfort was secondary to survival. Play it, she ordered. The bridge crew listened in silence as Kethara's desperate plea filled the air. When it finished, the bridge was quiet except for the hum of the ship's engines and the occasional beep from monitoring stations. Sir, whispered Ensign Park, the youngest member of the bridge crew. Did she say 3 billion people? Chen nodded grimly. That's what she said. She turned to her tactical officer. Commander Hayes, what do we know about this Zorthak Empire? Commander Hayes, a tall man with graying hair and scars across his left cheek, pulled up data on his console. Limited information, Captain. They're located about 8 light-years from here, in what the Galactic Council considers the civilized part of space. Military dictatorship, highly aggressive, but they usually stick to conquering and enslaving rather than genocide. Usually, Chen repeated. And the Velthani? Peaceful species, Captain. They're known throughout the galaxy as artists and philosophers. No military to speak of. They trusted in the protection of galactic law and the non-aggression pacts. Chen felt a familiar anger building in her chest. She'd seen this before, peaceful species trusting in laws and treaties while predators sharpen their claws in the dark. It was the same story that had played out on Earth for thousands of years, and apparently, it wasn't limited to one planet. Captain, Lieutenant Rodriguez spoke up again. We're receiving another transmission.
This one's from the Galactic Council. Let's hear it.
A new hologram appeared, showing a tall, elegant being with pale green skin and 4 arms. The creature wore elaborate robes marking him as a high-ranking official. "Attention human vessel," the alien said in a condescending tone.
"This is Administrator Quelch of the Galactic Council. We are aware that you may have intercepted the recent transmission from the Velthan system. We advise you not to interfere in this matter.
The Zorthak Empire is a sovereign nation, and their internal affairs are not subject to outside intervention." The message continued, but Chen had stopped listening.
Internal affairs. They were calling the systematic extermination of 3 billion people an internal affair. "Sir?"
Commander Hayes was looking at her with concern.
"Orders?"
Chen was quiet for a long moment, thinking.
The smart move would be to follow the Galactic Council's advice.
Humans were still relatively new to the galactic scene, having only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. They were vastly outnumbered by the older, more established civilizations. Getting involved in a conflict this size could bring the combined might of the galaxy down on Earth. But then she thought about Kethera's voice, the desperation and terror as she begged for someone, anyone, to help her people. Chen had grown up on Earth, a world where humanity had clawed its way to the top of the food chain through centuries of warfare and struggle. They had learned hard lessons about what happened when good people did nothing while evil flourished. "Plot a course for the Velthan system," she ordered.
"Maximum speed."
The bridge crew exchanged glances. This was mutiny in all but name, disobeying direct orders from their government, which had strict policies about non-interference in galactic affairs.
"Ma'am," Hayes said carefully, "Admiral Morrison's standing orders are clear. We're not to engage in conflicts with galactic powers without explicit authorization."
Chen turned to face her crew. These were people she had served with for years, people she trusted with her life. They deserved an explanation.
"You're right, Commander. Admiral Morrison's orders are clear.
But I swore an oath when I put on this uniform.
Not just to follow orders, but to protect the innocent and stand against evil wherever I found it."
She gestured to the now empty holographic display where Kethera's message had played.
3 billion people are dying while the galaxy's civilized species file paperwork and talk about sovereignty.
She paused, looking each crew member in the eye.
"I won't order any of you to come with me.
This is my decision, and I'll face the consequences.
But I'm going to Velthan, and I'm going to do whatever I can to help those people. Anyone who wants to leave can take the shuttles back to Earth.
No questions asked, no mark on your record."
The bridge was silent for a long moment.
Then Ensign Park spoke up, his young voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were discussing.
"Captain, my family came from a small country on Earth.
When the wars came, the world powers talked about sovereignty and non-interference while my grandparents' entire village was wiped out. I didn't join the fleet to watch that happen again." One by one, the other crew members voiced their agreement. These were humans, products of a world that had taught them that sometimes the right choice wasn't the easy choice. "Very well," Chen said, feeling a mixture of pride and terror.
"Helm, engage the FTL drive. We have people to save."
The Retribution's massive engines roared to life, tearing a hole in spacetime itself. The ship disappeared in a flash of brilliant light, racing toward a distant star system where an ancient evil was about to learn what happened when someone threatened the innocent within reach of humanity's war machine. 3 days later, the Retribution dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Velthan system. What they found there was worse than any of them had imagined. Velthan Prime had been a beautiful world, known throughout the galaxy for its crystal cities and floating gardens.
Now it burned. Massive Zorthak dreadnoughts hung in orbit like vultures, their dark hulls bristling with weapons. Smaller ships darted through the atmosphere, hunting down the few remaining population centers.
"Jesus Christ," whispered Lieutenant Rodriguez, staring at the tactical display.
"There are 47 Zorthak ships in the system.
We count 6 dreadnoughts, 15 cruisers, and 26 destroyers." Chen felt her stomach sink. The Retribution was a powerful ship, but it was still just one vessel against an entire fleet. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and so far from home that no help was coming.
Captain, Hayes reported, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the planet's surface.
It looks like they're using some kind of orbital bombardment weapons.
Not just targeting military installations, they're sterilizing entire continents. Any sign of surviving Velfani ships?
Negative, sir. Their entire fleet appears to have been destroyed in the initial assault. Chen studied the tactical display, her mind racing through possibilities.
There had to be something they could do.
They hadn't come this far just to watch.
Commander Hayes, what's our weapons status?
All systems online, Captain. We have full loads in all missile tubes, and the main plasma cannons are charged and ready.
And the special package? Hayes smiled grimly. The experimental singularity torpedo is ready for deployment, but Captain, we've never tested it in actual combat. The theoretical yield is enormous, but
we don't know if it'll work, Chen finished.
Understood.
She turned to the communications officer.
Rodriguez, any word from Earth? Nothing yet, Captain.
At this range, it would take 4 days for a message to reach Earth and another 4 for a response.
8 days.
By then, every Velfani on the planet would be dead, and the Zorthak fleet would be long gone.
They were on their own.
Captain, called Ensign Park from the sensor station.
I'm detecting something.
There's a small cluster of life signs in the northern hemisphere, underground.
It looks like maybe 1,000 individuals.
Survivors?
It's possible, sir. The area is heavily shielded, looks like some kind of bunker complex.
Shen made her decision.
Plot an intercept course for the nearest Zorthak destroyer. We're going to send a message.
Sir?
Hayes looked confused. What kind of message?
Shen's smile was cold and predatory, the expression of an apex predator that had just decided to hunt.
The kind that gets their attention.
The Retribution moved deeper into the system, its stealth systems engaged to avoid detection for as long as possible. Shen knew they couldn't hide forever, the ship was too large and too heavily armed to remain invisible once they got close.
But they didn't need forever. They just needed a few minutes. Target acquired, Hayes reported. Zorthak destroyer, bearing 27 Mark IV.
She's moving to intercept those life signs on the planet.
Distance? 50,000 kilometers and closing. Weapons range? 30,000 kilometers for optimal targeting.
Chen watched the tactical display as the gap between the two ships narrowed.
The Zorthak destroyer was sleek and predatory, built for speed and firepower.
It was probably twice the size of anything the Velfani had fielded, designed to terrorize and destroy weaker opponents.
It had never faced a human warship. 25,000 kilometers, Captain. Locked targets.
Full spread, all forward tubes.
Locked and ready. Fire. 6 plasma torpedoes streaked through space, their brilliant blue trails visible against the darkness. The Zorthak destroyer's sensors detected the incoming weapons with barely seconds to spare.
Point defense systems activated, shooting down 3 of the torpedoes, but the remaining 3 struck home. The explosion was spectacular.
The destroyer's shields flared and collapsed, and secondary explosions rippled along its hull as internal systems overloaded.
The ship's rear section broke away, spinning off into space, while the forward section tried desperately to limp away from the engagement.
Direct hit! Hayes shouted.
Target is severely damaged and unable to continue pursuit of the life signs.
But even as he spoke, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Captain! Rodriguez called out. The rest of the Zorthak fleet is responding. All ships are changing course to intercept us. Chen nodded. She'd expected this.
Once they fired on the destroyer, their position was revealed, and there was no hiding from 46 enemy ships.
Time to intercept?
18 minutes for the closest cruiser, 25 for the main battle group.
18 minutes.
Chen thought about the 1,000 Velfani survivors hiding in their bunker, probably listening to the sounds of battle overhead and wondering if rescue had finally come. 18 minutes to figure out how one ship could stand against an entire fleet.
All hands, this is the captain, she announced over the ship's intercom.
General quarters. This is not a drill. We are about to engage superior enemy forces in defense of an innocent population. I won't lie to you, the odds are not in our favor.
But remember who we are and where we come from. We are human beings, and we don't abandon people who need our help.
She paused, listening to the sound of her crew rushing to battle stations.
For 3 billion years, life on Earth was defined by one simple rule: adapt or die. We adapted.
We survived ice ages and asteroid impacts, predators and plagues, and we came out stronger each time. Today, we face a different kind of predator, but the rule remains the same. She looked around the bridge at her crew, young and old, experienced veterans and fresh recruits, all united by their shared humanity and their commitment to doing what was right. Adapt or die, she said quietly.
Let's show them how we adapt.
The first wave came in fast and hard, 6 Zorthak destroyers, moving in a standard pack formation designed to overwhelm enemy defenses through concentrated fire. It was a tactic that had worked against the Velfani and dozens of other species over the years. It had never been tested against Deathworlders.
Incoming missiles! Hayes shouted. 43 plasma torpedoes, impact in 30 seconds. Evasive maneuvers, Chen ordered. Point defense online, full coverage. The Retribution twisted and rolled through space, its massive bulk moving with surprising grace.
Human ships were built to be tough, but they were also built to be agile on Earth. The difference between quick and dead was often measured in milliseconds. Point defense lasers filled space with deadly light, picking off the incoming torpedoes one by one. The few that made it through struck the ship's heavy armor plating, causing damage but nothing critical.
Their turn, Chen said coldly. All tubes, fire as they bear. The Retribution's return salvo was devastating. Unlike the Zorthak weapons, which were designed to disable and capture, human weapons were built to kill. Plasma torpedoes struck 3 of the destroyers, penetrating their shields and hulls like hot knives through butter.
One ship simply vaporized in a brilliant flash of light. Another broke in half, its crew compartments explosively decompressing. The third managed to survive the initial impact but was clearly out of the fight. 3 enemy destroyers destroyed or disabled, Hayes reported with professional calm. The remaining 3 are falling back to regroup. Chen nodded, but she knew this was just the beginning. The Zorthak commanders would have learned from that first exchange. They wouldn't underestimate the human ship again. Captain, Rodriguez called out, I'm receiving a transmission from the Zorthak flagship. Put it through. The main viewscreen shimmered, and then showed the bridge of a massive Zorthak dreadnought. The alien commander was tall and reptilian, with dark scales and burning red eyes. When he spoke, his voice was a harsh rasp that conveyed both arrogance and fury. Human vessel, this is Fleet Commander Tharkos of the Zorthak Imperial Navy. You have interfered in lawful military operations and destroyed 3 of my ships. Surrender immediately, and your deaths will be quick. Chen stepped forward, making sure the alien commander could see her clearly. Fleet Commander Tharkos, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Retribution. You are engaged in the systematic extermination of a peaceful species. Withdraw immediately, or face the consequences. Tharkos's laughter was like the sound of grinding metal. Bold words from the commander of a single ship facing my entire fleet. You humans are even more foolish than the reports suggested. Reports? Chen raised an eyebrow. So you know about us? Of course. Your species has a reputation for violence and savagery. The Galactic Council considers you barely civilized barbarians, useful only as mercenaries and soldiers. You think your primitive weapons and crude tactics can stand against the might of the Zorthak Empire? Chen smiled, and something in her expression made the alien commander's eyes narrow with uncertainty. Commander Tharkos, she said quietly, you've just made a very serious mistake. You see, we humans have a saying, never threaten something you're not prepared to kill. And right now, you're threatening 300,000 innocent people who are under my protection. She gestured to someone off-screen, and Hayes stepped into view, his scarred face grim with purpose. This is my tactical officer, Commander Hayes.
He's going to explain exactly what's going to happen next. Hayes looked directly into the camera, his voice calm and professional.
Fleet Commander Tharkos, you have 43 ships remaining in your fleet.
Within the next hour, that number will be 0.
Your crews will be dead, your ships will be debris, and your empire will learn that there are some lines you don't cross. The alien commander's scales rippled with what might have been amusement.
Impossible. You are one ship. We're one human ship, Chen corrected. There's a difference.
She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. The next wave was already forming up, 2 cruisers and 8 destroyers, moving in a more cautious formation this time. They're being smarter about this, Hayes observed.
Spreading out their formation, trying to divide our fire.
Then we'll have to be smarter too, Chen replied. She studied the tactical display, her mind working through possibilities.
Hayes, what's the status on our experimental torpedo?
Fully charged and ready for deployment, Captain. But at this range, they'll see it coming and have time to evade.
Not if they're distracted. Chen turned to the helm officer.
Take us directly at the lead cruiser, full speed.
Make them think we're going for a ramming attack.
Captain, Hayes said carefully, if we get too close to that cruiser, their point defense will tear us apart. Trust me, Commander.
I have a plan.
The Retribution accelerated toward the Zorthak formation, its engines pushing the massive ship to its maximum velocity. To the alien commanders, it must have looked like a suicide run, one ship charging directly at superior forces with no apparent regard for survival.
It was exactly what Chen wanted them to think. Incoming fire. Rodriguez called out. All enemy ships are targeting us.
Space around the Retribution filled with plasma bolts and torpedo trails as the Zorthak fleet concentrated their fire on the charging human ship. The vessel's shields flared and sparked under the intense bombardment, and damage reports began flooding in from all sections.
Shields down to 60%. Hayes reported. Hull breaches on decks 7 and 11.
Hold course, Chen ordered.
Wait for it.
The lead Zorthak cruiser loomed larger on the viewscreen, its weapons ports glowing with lethal energy. At this range, there was no way the human ship could survive much longer under concentrated fire. Which was exactly when Chen sprang her trap.
Now, she shouted. Emergency stop. Deploy the Singularity torpedo.
The Retribution's engines reverse thrust, causing the massive ship to decelerate so rapidly that crew members were thrown against their restraints. At the same moment, a hatch opened on the ship's underside, and something that looked like a small metal sphere shot out into space.
To the Zorthak commanders, it probably looked like debris from battle damage.
The sphere was tiny compared to the massive warships around it, barely visible on their sensors. They had more important things to worry about, like the human dreadnought that had just performed an impossible maneuver right in the middle of their formation.
The Singularity torpedo drifted for exactly 12 seconds. Then it armed itself. The explosion was unlike anything the Zorthak had ever seen.
Instead of the bright flash of a conventional weapon, space simply folded in on itself, creating a microscopic black hole that lasted for just a fraction of a second. But in that brief instant, it consumed everything within a 5-kilometer radius. The lead cruiser vanished.
Not destroyed, not vaporized, it simply ceased to exist, along with 3 destroyers that had been too close to the detonation point.
The remaining ships were thrown around like toys in a hurricane, their crews struggling to understand what had just happened.
Direct hit.
Hayes shouted, his professional composure finally cracking.
Target destroyed.
3 additional ships severely damaged. Chen allowed herself a grim smile.
The experimental weapon had worked even better than projected. But they weren't done yet. All remaining tubes, fire at will. Target the damaged ships first. The next few minutes were a slaughter. The surviving Zorthak ships, still reeling from the impossible weapon that had just been used against them, couldn't mount an effective defense. Human plasma torpedoes tore through weakened shields and armor, finishing off the ships that had survived the Singularity torpedo's gravitational shockwave. When the firing stopped, 10 enemy ships had been destroyed or disabled. But Chen knew that this was still just the beginning. The main Zorthak fleet was still intact,
and they would be much more careful now.
Captain, Rodriguez reported, the enemy fleet is repositioning. They're forming a defensive sphere formation around their flagship.
Smart, Hayes observed. They're trying to force us to come to them, where they can concentrate their fire.
Chen studied the tactical display. The Zorthak had 40 ships left, including their massive flagship. Even with the element of surprise gone, they still vastly outnumbered the Retribution.
But surprise wasn't the only advantage humans had learned to use. Open a channel to all ships, she ordered.
All frequencies. Channel open, Captain.
Chen stood in the center of the bridge, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had just proved that impossible things were possible.
Attention Zorthak fleet. This is Captain Chen of the UES Retribution. You have just witnessed a demonstration of human military technology.
We have weapons you've never seen before, tactics you don't understand, and a level of determination that your species apparently can't comprehend. She paused, letting her words sink in.
But I'm not interested in destroying your entire fleet.
I'm here for one reason, to protect the innocent people you're trying to murder. Here's my offer, withdraw from this system immediately, and no more of your people have to die. Stay, and I'll show you why the rest of the galaxy is afraid of Deathworlders. The response came quickly. Fleet Commander Tharkos appeared on the viewscreen again, but this time his arrogance was tempered with wariness. Captain Chen, your weapon was impressive.
But you have shown your hand.
You cannot have many of those devices, or you would have used them from the beginning.
And you are still outnumbered 40-1.
You're right, Chen admitted.
We don't have any more singularity torpedoes.
But Commander, you're thinking like a civilized being. You're thinking about acceptable losses and strategic objectives.
We're humans. We think about survival. She gestured to the tactical display showing the Zorthak formation.
Right now, you're thinking that 40 ships can defeat one ship through superior firepower.
But I'm thinking about something different. I'm thinking about ramming speed.
The alien commander's eyes widened as he understood the implication.
You're bluffing.
No commander would sacrifice their ship and crew in a suicidal attack.
Wouldn't they? Chen's smile was cold as winter.
Commander, my species spent millions of years as prey animals. We learned that sometimes the only way to survive is to become so dangerous that the predators decide to hunt easier targets. We learned that sometimes you have to be willing to lose everything to save what matters most.
She stepped closer to the camera. I have 4,700 people on this ship. Every one of them volunteered to be here, knowing they might not make it home.
And every one of them would rather die fighting than live knowing they abandoned innocent people to monsters like you. The bridge was silent except for the hum of engines and the quiet beeping of monitoring systems. Chen could feel the weight of her crew's trust, their willingness to follow her into whatever came next. So here's what's going to happen, Fleet Commander. You're going to give the order to withdraw from this system. Or I'm going to pick the biggest, most expensive ship in your fleet, probably that lovely flagship you're standing on, and I'm going to ram it at maximum velocity. My ship will be destroyed, but the kinetic energy from a dreadnought moving at near light speed will turn your flagship into a very pretty expanding cloud of superheated plasma. She paused, letting the threat sink in.
And after that, Earth will send more ships. Bigger ships. Ships with more experimental weapons and crews who are even more angry than mine.
And they'll keep coming until every Zorthak in this system is dead and your empire learns to leave peaceful species alone.
The transmission cut off, leaving Chen alone with her crew. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Hayes cleared his throat. Captain, are you actually planning to ram their flagship? Chen considered the question seriously.
If that's what it takes to save those people down there, yes.
But I don't think it will come to that. How can you be sure? Because Commander Tharkos is a civilized being. He thinks in terms of cost and benefit, acceptable losses, and strategic objectives.
And right now, he's calculating whether destroying one human ship is worth the cost of losing his flagship and potentially facing a war with a species crazy enough to build singularity torpedoes. As if summoned by her words, the communications system crackled to life.
Human ship retribution, this is Fleet Commander Tharkos. We require time to consider your proposal. You have 10 minutes, Chen replied. After that, I'm going to assume you've made your choice. The next 10 minutes were the longest of Chen's life. She stood on the bridge, watching the tactical display as the Zorthak fleet maintained their defensive formation. Her crew worked quietly at their stations, checking weapons systems and preparing for whatever came next. With 30 seconds left on her deadline, the Zorthak fleet began to move.
Captain, Hayes reported, his voice carefully neutral.
Enemy ships are breaking formation.
They're moving toward the system edge. Chen felt a wave of relief so intense it almost buckled her knees.
All ships?
Yes, sir.
The entire fleet is withdrawing.
A cheer went up from the bridge crew, but Chen held up a hand for silence.
They weren't done yet. Rodriguez, open a channel to the surface. See if you can reach the survivors.
It took several minutes to establish contact, but finally, a familiar voice crackled through the speakers.
This is Ambassador Cathara. Is someone there? Are we safe?
Chen stepped forward, her voice gentle.
Ambassador, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Retribution. The Zorthak fleet has withdrawn from your system. You're safe.
The silence that followed was broken by the sound of sobbing, relief and grief combined as the weight of survival mixed with the horror of loss.
Captain Chen, Cathara finally managed to say. How many of you are there? How many ships? Just one ship, Ambassador. But sometimes one is enough. The rescue operation took 3 days.
Chen had ordered her crew to work around the clock, using the ship's shuttles and transporters to evacuate every surviving Velthani they could find. The final count was 847 individuals, less than 1% of the planet's original population, but 847 people who were alive because a human captain had decided that doing the right thing was more important than following orders. As they prepared to leave the Velthan system, Chen stood in her ready room, looking out at the devastated planet below. 3 billion people had died here, and no amount of tactical victory could change that fact. A chime from her door interrupted her thoughts.
Come in. Ambassador Cathara entered, moving slowly on legs that were still weak from days of hiding and fear. The Velthani diplomat looked fragile, her pale blue skin almost translucent with exhaustion, but her large dark eyes were clear and determined.
Captain Chen, she said, her voice steady despite everything she had been through. I wanted to thank you before we reached the refugee station. You saved our lives, but more than that, you saved our hope.
Chen turned from the window, studying the alien woman. I'm sorry we couldn't save more of your people, Ambassador.
If we had arrived sooner.
No, Cathara interrupted firmly. You cannot blame yourself for our losses.
You did something that no other species in the galaxy was willing to do.
You risked everything to help strangers.
She moved closer, her expression intense.
Captain, I need you to understand something. What happened here, this won't be the end.
The Zorthak Empire has been expanding for decades, conquering and enslaving world after world. The Galactic Council does nothing because they're afraid, because it's easier to look the other way than to risk their own comfortable lives.
Chen nodded. She'd suspected as much from the Council's transmission. But you're different, Cathara continued. Your species is different.
You have something the rest of the galaxy has forgotten, the courage to stand against evil, even when the odds are impossible. She reached into her robes and pulled out a small crystalline device.
This contains everything we know about the Zorthak Empire, their fleet positions, their technology, their weaknesses.
More importantly, it contains the locations of other species they've conquered or are planning to conquer.
Billions of innocent people who are suffering under their rule. Chen took the device, feeling its weight in her hands. It was more than just data, it was a responsibility. Ambassador, what are you asking me to do? Cathara's smile was sad but determined. I'm asking you to be what the galaxy needs, Captain. I'm asking you to wake up the war machine. The journey back to Earth took 6 days.
Chen spent most of that time studying the data Cathara had given her, learning about the Zorthak Empire and the dozens of species they had conquered over the past century. The scope of it was staggering: entire civilizations reduced to slavery, their cultures destroyed, their people bred like livestock. And through it all, the Galactic Council had done nothing. When the Retribution finally dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Sol system, they were met by a reception committee that included half the Earth Defense Fleet.
Chen wasn't surprised. Word of their unauthorized mission had undoubtedly reached Earth days ago. Captain, Rodriguez reported, "We're being hailed by the EDS Washington. Admiral Morrison wants to speak with you immediately."
Chen straightened her uniform and walked to the communications station. Admiral Morrison appeared on the viewscreen, his weathered face showing a mixture of anger and concern. "Captain Chen," he said without preamble, "you have a lot of explaining to do. You disobeyed direct orders, engaged in unauthorized military action, and potentially started a war with a galactic power. I should have you court-martialed."
"Yes, sir," Chen replied simply. "But I'd do it again." Morrison's eyebrows rose. "Would you, indeed? And why is that, Captain?"
Chen looked around at her bridge crew, the people who had followed her into the unknown because they believed in doing what was right.
"Because sometimes, Admiral, following orders isn't enough. Sometimes you have to choose between being a good soldier and being a good human being."
She gestured to the viewscreen, where Earth hung like a blue jewel against the darkness of space. Our species clawed its way to the top of the food chain on one of the most dangerous worlds in the galaxy.
We survived ice ages and asteroid impacts, predators and plagues.
We learned to work together, to protect the weak, to stand against those who would prey on the innocent.
That's what makes us human, sir.
Not our technology or our weapons, but our willingness to fight for what's right, even when the fight seems hopeless.
Morrison was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "Captain, I've received reports from the Galactic Council. They're displeased with your actions. They're demanding that we turn you over for trial as a war criminal."
Chen felt her heart sink, but she kept her expression steady.
"I understand, sir."
"I told them to go to hell," Morrison continued, and Chen blinked in surprise.
"Captain, I've also received reports from the Belfani survivors you rescued.
They've been telling their story to anyone who will listen, and the galaxy is starting to pay attention. The Zorthak Empire has been exposed, and other species are beginning to speak out about their atrocities."
The Admiral's expression grew serious. "Captain, what you did was technically insubordination.
But it was also the right thing to do.
And that's why I'm not court-martialing you. Instead, I'm promoting you.